All right, here we are. Welcome to Introduction to Hebrew Grammar by me, Baracha Bat Mila V'Shlomo. This is a language class. We're going to go through what Hebrew is, some of the alphabet, a little bit of grammar, some counting and phrases, and hopefully you will enjoy that. Now, this is a companion to my other class, Evolution of the Hebrew Language, which is a little bit more of the history class. You don't need one to enjoy the other, just letting you know that it's out there. If you would like to take a look, you can always, of course, enjoy them separately. In this class, we're going to be going over who uses Hebrew, when, and why, the alphabet, some grammar, some useful phrases that hopefully you can use, and of course, a little bit about how you can use it in the SCA. Spoiler alert, the answer is however you so desire. You are not going to leave this class as a fluent speaker, but hopefully you'll learn some cool facts about Hebrew and be able to pick up some cool new phrases to use in your play. So we're going to get started with just a little bit of background. Primarily, Hebrew is spoken by the Jews. The Jews are an ethno-religious group originally from the southern Levant, in what we now know today as Israel or Palestine. The Jews did not just stay in the little corner. Thanks to multiple trades and empires, you started to have a diaspora already in antiquity. However, the origins of the modern global diaspora are due to the Roman Empire. Especially after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in the year 70, you have a massive spreading of Jewish population, both by choice and by force, around the rest of the Middle East, North Africa, the Mediterranean, and Europe. This is ultimately the origin of the wide global distribution of the Jewish people to this day. This map shows migration through the year 500, so the late antiquity, well into SCA period. Whereas this map over here, this shows Jews moving around in Europe and the Mediterranean area until the end of period, till 1600. What this map is showing you is that Jews moved around a lot. They did not just pull up in Poland and stay there for 1,000 years. Some did, if they were lucky, but due to ethnic and religious oppression, and also sometimes trade or marriage or travel, folks would move around. Sometimes, though, you're looking at, as this map shows you, the deliberate expulsion of Jewish communities. And this led to a lot of constant migration throughout the entire area and ultimately to the New World as well. Where Jewish communities went, Hebrew as well as other syncretic diasporic languages went with them. What this means for the SCA is that you do not need to be Jewish and your persona does not need to be Jewish in order to speak Hebrew. While plenty of Jews did speak Hebrew, plenty of non-Jews did as well. Elite Christians, including some priests, would deliberately make a study of Hebrew, particularly to look at non-translated or only partially translated texts. While not as widespread as priestly study of Latin, it was still something that happened. And as we have established with maps, Jews were pretty much everywhere. It is very reasonable and probable for your persona to have run into somebody Jewish and use that as a reason in your persona history to speak Hebrew, if you so desire. It's up to you. Now we are going to take a look at the alphabet. This is your standard Hebrew alphabet. It has been in use for thousands of years. It is called Kitav Ashuri, which literally means Assyrian letters. This alphabet was picked up from the Babylonian diaspora with Assyrian Aramaic communities. So this was originally an Aramaic alphabet that was learned by the Jewish people in the region and then spread through the rest of the Jewish communities in the Middle East. And this is the language this is the alphabet that we use to this day. So this is very established by the time we're doing anything in period. We're going to go through the alphabet together. Hebrew, like other Semitic languages, goes from right to left, the opposite of Hebrew. So we're going to start in the upper right corner, right over here, with the letter Aleph. This is one of the few vowels in the Hebrew language. Most vowels are modified consonants, by which I mean you put little dots and squiggles around them. But this letter is essentially equivalent to the letter A. Next to it is B, bet. You'll notice there's a little dot here. That dot is called a dagesh, and it changes how the letter sounds. If I were to remove the dot, the B becomes a V. very soft v. So with or without a dagesh, the word beit becomes vit. You'll see that sometimes. This third letter is gimel, and it makes a g sound. The letter next to it is a dalet, and it makes a d sound, just like the letter D. This letter, hey, is essentially an H. It's a h sound, breathy consonant. At the end of a word, just like in English, it'll be an ah or an eh sound, much softer sound. It's very similar to the letter H in English in that manner. The letter next to it is the letter vav, which has a V sound unless it has a U sound. What that means is that depending on how this letter is used, it will either be a consonant, a v, or it will be an oo or an o sound. I will cover this later when we go over vowels and how vowels work in the Hebrew language. What you need to know now is that the letter vav is kind of tricky. Over here is the letter zayin, and it makes a z sound, just like the letter Z. This letter is het. It's very tricky for English speakers. And you'll notice that the sound beneath it has two H's. It's not a h sound, but it is a breathy letter. Different dialects of Hebrew will pronounce it slightly differently. Ashkenazi Hebrew will usually just have it as a ch sound, as a guttural, and that's fine. But historically, and in some Middle Eastern dialects of Hebrew, it'll be a het sound, a het. It's hard to demonstrate not being present, but it is in the back of the mouth at the beginning of the throat. So almost like you're clearing your throat, but not quite. Het, het. Those of you who are familiar with Arabic will be familiar with this sound. Next to it is the letter tet. It is a T in all accounts. It always goes ta, ta, ta. The tet is tutting at you. That is how I remember it. And I hope that is how you will remember it too. Next to it is my favorite letter in the whole alphabet, the letter yod. Just like the letter Y, this is a consonant and a vowel at the same time. When it is a consonant, it makes a y sound, but when it is a vowel, it makes an e sound. Next to it is the kaf or the chaf. You'll notice it also has a dagesh, the little dot inside, just like the letter bet. Depending on whether you put in the dot or remove it, the letter sound will change. With the dot, it makes a ka sound, ka, like C, as in cat. But if you take that dot out, it becomes a cha sound. This is actually the letter in my name, bracha. That is a guttural. Next to it is a sofit form. Sofit just means ending. Those of you familiar with Arabic may know that the letter changes depending on where it is in the word. It'll change its shape in the beginning, middle, or end of the word. Hebrew isn't nearly that complicated. Hebrew's letters are never capitalized, they're never lowercase, they just are, they never change their shape, except for 5 of them. 5 of them will change their shape if and only if they're at the end of a word. The kaf is one of those letters, and it shows you what it looks like in its ending form, its sofit form, right over here, so that you recognize that even though they look a little different, they're still the same letter. Next is the lamed, and it is an L sound. In English, the L is a dark L. It'll go ol. Your tongue is hitting the palate of your mouth. But Hebrew's L's are a little different. The lamed in Hebrew is a dental L, la, and the tongue hits right behind the teeth, la. It's a brighter L sound. Now, if you don't want to bother with that, that's fine. A dark L sound is completely intelligible to the average Hebrew speaker. It only means that you have an accent, not a big deal. Next to it is the letter mem, which is an M sound. Mem goes ma. You'll notice that this is a letter that also has a sofit or ending form. They're right next to each other here, so again, that you recognize it's actually the same letter. Next to it is the nun, which is an N. Nun goes na, very straightforward. You'll notice that the sofit, its ending form, looks a little bit like the vav or the yod. It's just a little longer. So be very careful and keep a sharp eye out and make sure that you know the letter that you're reading, because otherwise you'll say the word wrong. So just keep that in mind. Next to it is the samech, and it is the letter S. The samech goes sa, very simple. But the letter over here is an ayin. Ayin is a very tricky glottal fricative. What on earth does that mean? It's a sound that doesn't exist in English. It does exist in Arabic. It exists in a couple of other Semitic languages as well. Modern Hebrew and Ashkenazi Hebrew, or European Hebrew, will treat it like an aleph. It'll go ah, and that's the end of it. And you can do that. You can just go ah and call it a day. But in Middle Eastern dialects and also some more historic dialects, it will go ah, almost like you're swallowing something, like a G and an H got smashed together and you rammed it down your own throat. Ah. This actually does matter for translating and transliterating. If you'll notice, a piece of geography in the area is called the Gaza Strip. Gaza. Ga. But in Hebrew, the name of that little area is Gaza. Gaza with an ayin, not an aleph. Gaza. The reason why it's translated with a G is because it's an approximation of that ayin sound. So this is a sound in Hebrew and in Arabic that's a little bit difficult to describe in Hebrew. Don't stress out about it. Like I said, plenty of people just call it an ah and move on with their day, and you can do that as well. The letter next to it is a pe. P, pa, pa, pa. You'll notice again that little dot right over there, and that will change the sound of letter, just like with a kaf and just like with a bet. If you have the dot in, it's a pa. P, aspirated, fully present. If you remove it though, it's a fe, a fa, like a ph. The difference between P as in presence or pH as in fat. So, that is what is going on there. That is the difference. Same letter, technically speaking, but two very different sound values depending on whether you have the dagesh in or the dagesh gone. You'll notice, of course, again, a sophete form right next to it so that you can recognize that it's the same letter. Over here we have the tzadi, a ts sound. In English, we represent that sound by having a T and an S next to each other to form a compound sound, but Hebrew just has its own letter, ts, tzadi. Again, it has a sophete or ending form right next to each other, so you can learn that they're the same letter. Next to it is the kuf. A lot of times, especially in modern Hebrew, that's just a ka sound, kind of like the kaf, ka and ka. But technically speaking, it is a different letter, and it had an original sound value, a ka, a little further back in the throat, whereas a kaf would go ka, a kof would go ko, kind of like you're coughing. Don't worry about it if that sort of throaty sound is difficult for you. It's very unusual to be presented with these sounds in the English language. Do your best, or just call it a K and move on with your day. It's totally fine. You'll be completely intelligible to any Hebrew speaker. Now this sound is the resh, ra. It has two R's over here because it's indicating to you that in Hebrew, the R is rolled. Modern Hebrew will roll it in the back, sort of like the French, ra, ra. That also is a little hard for many English speakers. Some Hebrew speakers will roll the R in the front, especially if they're singing, and this is also perfectly correct. Ra, ra. If you prefer to trill the R with your tongue in the front against your teeth, that is also fine. Everybody will understand you. If you want to continue using your American-styled R, again, you'll just have an accent, but you'll be totally intelligible, and that is totally fine. This letter over here with these three branches is called a shin. If it has a little dot on the right-hand side, it makes a sh sound, an SH. But if it has a little dot on the other side, it makes a s sound. So you will not necessarily see those little dots present in modern Hebrew texts. You'll have to sort of infer it. Very, very difficult for novice speakers. But again, you're looking at a letter that, depending on where you place a dot, the sound will morph from sa to sha. This over here is the final letter in the alphabet, the letter taf. Again, you'll notice the dagation there. With the dagation there, it makes a t sound, just like the tet. It's tutting at you. If you want to make a distinguishing difference between them, the tet up here, the ninth letter, is a fully aspirated T. That means that there's a puff of air that exits your mouth as you say the letter or its sound. Whereas this T is a bit softer, ta versus ta. But again, you don't have to worry about that. If you just want to make a T sound, this is correct. If you take the dagesh out, the value of the letter changes. In Ashkenazi or European Hebrew, Without the little dot in there, it is a saf. It makes a sa sound, a very soft sound, kind of like the samach. But in some Middle Eastern dialects of Hebrew, it becomes a thou, a thaw sound. Modern Hebrew does not use a thaw sound. This is very unusual. You'll find some old grandpas speaking like that. But this is something that did exist in terms of different dialects. This weird looking letter is a compound letter. You will not see it in modern Hebrew unless somebody is being scribal arts fancy at you. It is an aleph and lamed together, so you can go al. You will not see it anywhere, and I honestly don't know why it's in this chart. But now you know, and if you want to be scribal and fancy, you now have a way to combine two letters. This is another Hebrew English chart. I included it for ease of use. Maybe you might find this chart a little easier to understand. What I like about it is that it has the letter, the name of the letter in Hebrew, the name of the letter transliterated, the sound value, and also the numerical value. Just like English, you can use alphanumeric codes, whereas A is 1 and B is 2. Gematria is similar alphanumeric code for Hebrew. They also have the sophit forms, the ending forms, the letters that have different endings are right down at the very bottom of the chart rather than next to the letters. Remember how I said about the shin and the sin? So this one with the dot on the right is the sh, sh sound, and this one with the dot on the left is the s sound. Modern Hebrew, this letter always is a T sound, so this chart didn't distinguish and did not bother to put a dot in there because in modern Hebrew, there's only one sound to that letter. They no longer really have two separate sounds for it. Though if you are engaging with a very traditional Ashkenazi community, they will maintain that distinction. So fun facts about Hebrew. You might have noticed that Hebrew doesn't have a lot of vowels. So in the Middle Ages, people invented vowels. These are called nikud, which literally just means dots. It's a little system of dashes and dots to tell you what the vowel sound is in a given word. Otherwise, it's kind of like looking at the word house, but the O, U, and the E are gone. You can sort of figure it out, but it's a little difficult. This makes reading a little bit easier. It's also a very good teaching tool. So we're going to start from the right, just like Hebrew does. We go from right to left. Most of these sounds, most of these sound dots go underneath the letter. So this one is a kamatz. It says the word in Hebrew, and it says the same word in English. It's like a little upside down top hat. And like a top hat, it goes ah, like an O, ah. And it goes underneath the letter. So here you see a kuf with a kamatz for ka. The patach also goes underneath the letter, and it goes ah. So here you have a pei, little dot, and a patach underneath, pa, patach. This one is a sere, these two dots, and they make an a sound. So here we have a tzadik with the a underneath, sere. Very straightforward. This guy over here is called a segel, these little three dots, and they go eh. So it's a very subtle difference between a and but it's a real difference. It's there. This is a different sound. Again, it goes underneath the letter. This one, it's an sound. But instead of taking up more time for the vowel to sort of fill your mouth the way that we've been doing, what the shva indicates is that you're cutting the time on that letter in half, basically. You are shoving it together. So instead of having the consonant with its syllable and taking up the whole space of the syllable, you're smushing the syllables together. So instead of having two syllables, you're smushing it into one syllable. Over here you have the shin with the the shva underneath it, and instead of shiva, it's shva. Instead of it being a two-syllable word, it's a one-syllable word, shva. Little tricky, but you'll get the hang of it. This guy is different. This is called a cholam. It's the little dot and it goes on top of a letter. It makes an O sound. If you remember with the alphabet that we just went through, the letter vav is a V until it's like a U or an O, how it's a consonant that turns into a vowel. The cholam is one way that the consonant does that. It goes on top of the letter, and sometimes if it's a regular consonant, it'll just be an O sound. Like if it was a lamed and a cholam, it would be a lo. But with a vav, it changes the vav into a vowel. You're not going chevolam over here in the word. You're going cholam. It changes the va into an o. Cholam. This happens with the letter vav a lot, so just be mindful of that. We have a couple of combinations over here. Now remember how I said the shva makes the syllable collapsed. It forces things to be one syllable instead of two. That's what's going on here. So if you see a shva next to another sound, you ignore the shva and just say the sound really fast. So a chataf kamatz is just an ah. A chataf patach is just ah. You don't need to worry. A chataf segol is eh. So it's very much the same thing. The reason that they're on top of each other is this chart is telling you that you pronounce it the same way. We skipped this guy. This little guy is one little dot. It goes right underneath the letter and it goes E. E. It is my favorite sound in the Hebrew language. So here you'll notice that it has a het and a little chirik underneath, has a resh, little chirik underneath. Just going to look at this word over here. You'll notice that there's a yud, that little letter. This is where a yud is a vowel. So it tells you how to say it. Chirik. Chirik. There you go. You're reading Hebrew. We talked about the chataf segol. It's just an eh. This is a kubutz. These three diagonal lines are not tic-tac-toe. It's just an oo sound. And here you see the kof with the oo underneath. Kubutz. Oo. The shuruk also makes an oo, but it makes an oo with the letter vav specifically. So remember, the kubutz goes underneath a regular consonant, but the shuruk, which goes oo, is used for the letter vav. And that also makes the vav from a consonant, a va, into a vowel, an oo. So it has a little bit of a different use than the kubutz. They both go oo, but they go oo for different letters. Oh, wrong direction. We need to stop and talk about gender. A lot of English is not particularly gendered. Pretty much everything is gender neutral. The word table doesn't have a gender. Well, it does in Hebrew. Like many other Semitic languages, Hebrew is highly gendered. Every noun has a gender, male or female. Those are the only two genders in the Hebrew language. This is not a judgment call about a person's gender. It's a grammatical gender, so it has a very different use. Now, this does reflect in how the word. So a lot of times, if you're conjugating a female word, like the word behema, which means animal, it ends in the letter he, and it will be conjugated in a different manner than a masculine word. Many female words end in the letter he, but this isn't always true. It's a sometimes rule, a most of the time rule, but it's not an always rule. So be careful of false friends. And when it comes to numbers, that rule is flipped altogether. A lot of numbers that are masculine end in the letter he, and they do not when they're feminine numbers. So it can get a little confusing, but it's more or less formulaic. You just have to learn to get to know it. This does lead to some interesting and fun problems when dealing with grammatical gender. If you're dealing with a mixed group, for example, a group of men and women, generally speaking, the pronoun for a group defaults to male. In theory, one male in a group of females makes the whole group a male thing. But this has always been highly contested. When I was a little kid in yeshiva day school and we were learning about Hebrew grammatical gender, the first thing that happened in my all-girls class was, so if a male teacher walks into the room, all of a sudden, this whole class is no longer female? And the teacher kind of looked at us and goes, well, yes. I'm here to tell you, well, no, not necessarily. Feel free to gender it how you want. Now, of course, this runs into a problem for anybody who is themselves non-binary or if they have a non-binary persona. In modern Hebrew, the Jewish and Israeli queer community is developing gender-neutral and non-binary conjugation. Is this period? No, it's new. But that's okay. The gender possibilities of this language is changing, and I want you to know that if you really do want to use gender-neutral language for yourself or for any other reason, It now exists in the Hebrew language, and you should feel free to look it up. I included a link to it in your handout, so please feel free to avail yourselves of those resources. Just because a language is structured in a certain way doesn't mean you need to stick to it if it's not meeting your needs. So there are more inclusive options out there, even with the Hebrew language. Moving on, we are going to take a look at masculine versus feminine, singular versus plural. You'll notice that with masculine on the right side, the words end in any old letter they feel like. They can end in the resh, they can end in the haf, they can end in a mem, they can do whatever they want. But the plural sound always ends in a yud mem, an im sound. So the singular for the word king is melech, very similar to the Arabic malik. They are in fact the same root. But the plural for kings is milachim. Davar, which means word, the plural is divarim, words. Ach, which means brother, the plural is achim, brothers. Yom, which is day, plural is yamim, days. Whereas feminine has a different structure. You'll notice that many of these words are ending in the letter hey, many but not all. Letter hey at the end of the word means it's probably female. The word eretz, which means land, the plural is artsot, lands. Behema, animal, plural is behemot. Mishpacha, family, plural is mishpachot, families. Na'ara, a young woman, generally for a teenager. Na'arot, young women. So plural for men, or masculine forms, I should say, is im. Plural for feminine forms is ot. Im versus ot. Now, unlike English, Hebrew has a dual form for specifically two pairs of things. I mentioned how yom had a plural for yamim. To say for 2 days, specifically 2 days, a pair of days, you'd say yomayim. This is very archaic. You don't find that very often. This is more for archaic Hebrew than it is for modern Hebrew. So feel free to ignore this part if you feel like it. Either way, you will be understood. Sha'ah, which means hours. Hour, sha'ot, hours plural. But for dual, sha'atayim, 2 hours. A little weird, right? It's a little clunky, but it's a lot of fun. So you can, if you're trying to make poems or compose songs, you can have a lot of fun with rhyming schemes because of this dual form, especially for romantic pairs of things, if you feel like it, that maybe you wouldn't have that option if you didn't have the dual form. So just planting a seed there in case any of you want to make some fun scroll work, if you feel like it. Next, we're going to do a little bit of grammar. This is very complex. This is the 7 binyanim. Binyan means building in Hebrew. Binyanim is, of course, buildings, plural. There are 7 different cases. We are not going to go through all of them. We just simply do not have the time. In general, though, you have the active, reflexive, and passive, causative, intensive, and simple. By crossing all of these or the other, you go from 3 to 7. This is reflective upon oneself. Hitpa'el is pretty fun because it is something that is being done to you by yourself. It is the active passive. It's probably my favorite case, and we're not going to study it at all. This little menorah structure is something that you'll find in a great many Hebrew language grammar textbooks. So get familiar with this chart. You're going to be looking at it a lot if you take another Hebrew class. What we are going to spend some time on is the past perfect because it is very easy. It is very predictable. I just kind of want to get you familiar with the structure of how you can change verbs around. With English, we're very used to using word order to indicate things, but Hebrew will smush words together to make compound words. First, we're going to look at the left side. We're going to go through some pronouns. Ani for I, ata for a male you. You'll notice that the hey at the end is right there, but it's for a male word. So again, it's a sometimes rule, not an only rule. At is for you, feminine, singular. Hu is for he. He is for she. This is very confusing for English speakers. Who is he is she. It's kind of like who's on first, but with Hebrew. Anachnu is for we. Atem, you, plural. Aten, you, plural. or female, male versus female, and n. Hen, they, female, hen or henna. Henna is a little more archaic. Hema, him or hema, they, for male, plural. Him is modern, hema is a little more archaic. Either is correct. And now we're going to go look at the past perfect tense form of shamar. Hebrew, like a lot of other Semitic languages, primarily builds words based on 3-letter roots, triconsonantal roots. This one, shamar, means to watch or to guard. It's very common to use this particular verb because it is a perfect verb. It doesn't do anything weird or unusual. So we're going to learn about how different people guard things. And of course, there is a song because this is what we did in Hebrew grade school, and I will inflict it upon your ears in a moment. First, we will go through the chart. You'll see here that there are the nikudot. You have the dots, so it will tell you how to pronounce it. Ani shamarti. So you see it rhymes. I guarded. Ata shamarta. You male guarded. At shamart. You female guarded. Useful if you're doing vigil, perhaps. Hu shamar, he guarded. He shamra. So here is where the he indicates feminine. She guarded. Anachnu shamarnu, we, collective, guarded. Atem shamartem, you, plural, males, guarded. Aten shamarten, you, plural, females, guarded. Him and hen are the same. Him or hen shamru. What this indicates is that you don't need to use the pronoun as a separate word because it is indicated in the building of the verb itself. So you can just eliminate a whole word if you feel like it. The song is Ani shamarti, ata shamarta, at shamart, ta ta ta. See, that's shah. Hu shamar, hi shamra, anachnu shamarnu, nu nu nu. Atem shamartem, atem shamarten, hem shamru, hem shamru. So there you go. I have now sung to you in Pennsic University. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it helps you remember grammar as well as I did when I was 7 years old. Moving on. Here is another chart for the same root and the same conjunctions. I included this chart as well because sometimes seeing it in a different form helps you understand it better. So it's a lot. I'm throwing a lot of information at you. There's more about this in your handout. The chart over here on the left side is actually 3 different tenses. You have the pronouns over here with yellow. You have the blue, which is hoveh, that is present tense, as in you are currently actively in the process of doing something. Over here it says hayom, today, achshav, now. Avar, which is past perfect, etmol, yesterday. Yesterday I did something. And green is atid, future. Machar, tomorrow. And it goes through how that works. So with both present and past, the pronoun and how you conjugate it is indicated at the end of the word. But in the future, it becomes at the beginning of the word. You have some endings over here that indicate plural, but for the most part, the beginning of the word. So we have gone through all the past before. Now we're going to go through very quickly the present. It's actually very simple. If it is yourself, that depends on your gender. If you are a male person, you would say, Ani shomer, I am currently watching or guarding. But I am a female person. And if I want to say, I am guarding this, or I am watching over this, it would be Ani shomeret. So that would be also true for you. If it's you male person, ata shomer. If it is a you female person, at shomeret. You'll notice that those are the same. And for plural, remember how we talked about the im and the ot endings? This is where that comes into play. If it is you plural men watching or guarding something, atem shomrim. You plural female guarding something, aten shomrot. And that's also true for hem, they male, hem shomrim, they are watching or guarding, and hen, they female, hen shomrot. So you have a lot less to memorize for present tense. We're all busy. We're doing it all right now. Atid has a little bit different. Like I mentioned before, atid, future tense, has the letter going in front. Ani eshmor, I will be watching or guarding. Ata tishmor, you male will be guarding. At tishmeri, you female will be guarding something. The e indicates that it's feminine. Hu yishmor, he will watch it. He tishmor, she will watch it. Anachnu nishmor, the nun indicates the nun. Anachnu nishmor, we will watch it together. Atem tishmeru, you plural male will watch it. Aten tishmorna, see that's very different. You female group tishmorna will watch it. Hem yishmeru, and you can use yishmeru for him and hin. Aten and him usually are the same. Here it has a little different. It's a little more archaic. Hen tishmorna. That is technically correct, which is the best kind of correct. This is going through numbers. Numbers are also gendered in the Hebrew language. So on the right side, you have the feminine. Achat, shtayim, shalosh, arba, hamesh, shesh, sheva, shmone, tesha, eser. It's a chart, so you have the Hebrew, the transliteration, and the translation. Now, in masculine, it sounds a little different, and you'll notice how many of these end with the letter hey. Remember how I said before, hey indicates female until it gets to numbers, when it's the opposite. So, echad, shnayim, shlosha, arba'a, hamisha, shisha, shiv'a, shmona, tesha, aseret. There is issues with these two. It's supposed to be ending in hey and a taf. I could not find a better chart on Google Images, and I only noticed that now, so sorry for that, but please feel free to contact me, and I will literally write it out for you on Facebook Live in Hebrew, the correct way to count. I apologize. Here is another chart. This one is going from 11 to 19. So while we have nice little teen numbers that indicate that they're teens, it's a little different for Hebrew, where you would have a number and then the tens column. So with masculine nouns, it would be achad asar. And with female, it would be achat asara. So it's gender depending on the noun that's next to it. So achad asar, shnei asar, shlosh asar. That's basically 1 in 10, 2 in 10, 3 in 10. So that is how that goes on all the way through until tisha asar. So shlosh asar, 13, arba asar, 14, hamisha asar, 15, shisha asar, 16, shiva asar, 17, shmona asar, 18, and tisha asar, 19. And that's just for masculine. But remember, everything's different with feminine. This is where it switches. Again, you have now all these heys that indicate that they're feminine. So the heys indicate feminine until it comes to numbers when they don't. But after the number 10, they indicate that they're feminine again. I'm sorry, it's confusing. But with the teens and counting, 11, 12, 13, or 12, 13, 14, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Just counted to 19. I know it's a lot of ways to count to 19, but this is in your handout and you can spend as much time with it as you like, and I'm always available to go over with you as many times as you want via email. Hebrew has an interesting relationship with articles. There is a very interesting word called et. While Hebrew doesn't have the definite article as such, this prefix, there's a prefix of the letter he, which indicates the. Usually, but not always, the letter et is also used in conjunction with it at the same time. It's a preposition used to introduce a direct object. It's used between a verb and the direct object it refers to, or when the direct object is a proper noun, like people, places, organizations, or personal pronoun. You don't actually need to use this word. You can have a perfectly normal, intelligible sentence with or without it. Prime Minister Ben Gurion hated the word et. He wanted to eliminate it from the Hebrew vocabulary because he thought it was uselessly elongating a sentence. Prime Minister Ben-Gurion and I have very different opinions on the word et. I love the word et. I think it's beautiful. I think it adds a flourish, and I think it's useful grammatically, even though in English we have no such thing. Now, sometimes the word et is incorporated into personal pronouns. This is a construction that not even the Prime Minister could eliminate from the Hebrew language. So if you would go et and hu, you would get the word oto, which means towards him or belongs to him. With a feminine version, et and he, you would get ota, belongs to her or towards her. Et and him is otam, which means to or of them, those people. And if it was for something that was going to or referring to something that was yours, et and ata is otcha. Et and at, going towards a feminine, you, otach. So these constructions still exist in the Hebrew language, and they are very important and they're very useful, no matter what Prime Minister Ben-Gurion says. These are more prepositions. It shows your relationship to something. So starting at the top and working our way down. El, which is to or towards. Al, with an ayin, which means on top of or above. Ben, between. Ben ha'arbayim is means between the hours, between the afternoon, and it's a term used for later afternoon. Tahat, which means underneath. Sometimes it could also be used instead of, like to swap out. It is also the word for one's rear end or bottom. Min, from within, from without of. Betoch, which is betwixt, within, between. Lifnei, before or in front of. Im means with, and ad means until. Achar or ahare means afterwards or behind. Etzel, which means right next to or right beside. And eight, not et, eight means with. It is a very archaic word, absolutely used in period. So if you're looking to make some period style Hebrew poetry, use that word. It is not used in modern Hebrew. I have never really seen it used in modern Hebrew unless someone's trying to be old-fashioned and or fancy. Again, Hebrew will contract things together to make a Franken word in a way that English does not. So bi makom, in the place, bimkom, in that place. Bi is a letter that is put in front of a word to mean inside or with. So the letter he means the, if you put it in front of the word, and bi means with or in. So sadeh means field, but bisadeh means in the field, and so on and so forth. Kimakom, like a place. Kamelech, like a king. Limkom or limakom, for or towards a place. La milchama, for battle. Great if you're writing about a good sir knight. This is just a chart of random vocabulary, just so that you're a little more familiar with how Hebrew sounds, and so that you can come away from this class knowing a bunch of random words. Yom is day, so you could say yom or yamin for days. Derech is a way or a path. Ish means man, and isha means woman, but the plural for that is a very archaic word, so it doesn't follow a lot of standard rules. The plural for women is nashim, and the plural for men is anashim. You have bat for daughter in my name, Baracha bat Mira, daughter of Mira. Banot, daughters. Shalach, he sent. Avar, to pass or cross over. Ot is the plural ending for female, which we already went over. Shamayim, that means sky or heavens. You'll notice that it is also a plural. So even though heaven is singular, Shamayim, because it is a plural singular thing, the many heavens as a unit. Just so if you're wondering why there's an im ending on what in English is a singular word. Eved is servant. Ir, city. Har is mountain. Ach is brother. Torah is, well, that's the Torah. It actually means scroll, as in a leather or parchment scroll that you would roll up. Behema is an animal, specifically a beast of the field. A chaya would be a wild animal, a beast of the forest. Av is father. Im is mother. And again, im, plural masculine ending, and ayim, a dual ending. And that concludes our Hebrew class. I hope you had fun. Please email any questions or comments. I will happily help you as to the extent of my abilities, and hopefully point you towards more resources if you want to continue learning Hebrew. I hope you had a wonderful time. So tada rabba, thank you very much. Lehitraot. I'll see you all later. Have a great evening and enjoy your virtual Pennsic.